Well, hello everyone. Regardless of where you're joining us from, I want to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you. Thank you for joining me on this topic. So my name is Chok, and I'm a solutions engineer with CrowdStrike. Right? I am based in Singapore, but I essentially work with businesses and organizations across Southeast Asia. So what we're going to talk about today is something that is really close to my heart. Right? And the reason why I say so is because I've got personal experience and I can relate to it more. Right? If you want to know, that I wasn't always from the vendor side. In fact, as I started out my career, I was actually with an end user organization. And unfortunately for us, we were also a victim of a cyber breach. Right? Looking back on the situation now, it was stressful to say the least, right? Where all of us were being put around, we were all taken away from our usual task to do other things, right? Just so that we can respond to the incident. It's not fun to think about it, and it certainly doesn't make for good bedtime stories with the kids or grandkids. So I sincerely wish that this is not an experience that anyone else in this session would have to go through. Right? But because I'm with the vendor now, I also get the chance to work day in and day out with businesses, right, across the region. And what I realized as a result is that many of us, right, we're not perfect, we're only human. We make the same mistakes, right? And these mistakes, if they go unchecked, have the potential to lead to something more serious. They have graver consequences. So it's actually important that we weed them out early and get rid of them. And yet these are the very mistakes, right, that if we take some time, just take a pause, and after that reflect, we would be able to resolve them. So what do I mean here, right? If only what we have done was to look at how the attackers go about conducting their mission, right? And learn from the mistakes of others. Apply them within our own environment, our security posture would be so much better. Now, as we go into the end of 2020, I think it is no longer an understatement, right? Or even an exaggeration to say that breaches are everywhere. And we've actually got the numbers to prove. So in a research conducted by IDC, 1 in 3 organizations have already been breached in the last 12 months. Very hard to believe, you say, right? But let's not forget that in order for an organization to be surfaced here, they must at least be able to detect that they've been breached, right? And in our region, detecting that we have been breached may be more difficult than we actually think, right? But whatever that may be, right, one thing is clear, right? The first cyber breaches were as early as the early 2000s, right? And since then, we've seen a steady increase in cyber attacks. But our response to it has been lukewarm at best. We haven't done very well, and that's why attacks have doubled and even tripled. Right? But as a civilization, we've always been able to overcome our difficulties. And this time round, it is no different. Right? We will also do it. So let's start. And a good place to start would actually be to look at the initial attack vectors or how the attackers get into our organization. So you see on the screen right here a series of categories, right, that the attackers use to come in. They range from spear phishing, web server compromise, credential compromise, and so on and so forth. The usual suspects, so to speak. The real question behind this slide is how we arrive at these insights so that it is reliable and you can use this information. So at CrowdStrike, our services team respond to hundreds of incident response engagement across the globe. And with each incident response engagement, the primary goal is very clear. We want to help business restore their operations as quickly as we can and in as little pain as possible. But one other thing about being in an incident response engagement is that it allows us to see a few things, right? Number one, it allows us to see how attackers systematically evade all the technical controls that are put in place by any given organization. And number two, if that organization thought that human processes are in place to guard against technical controls when they fail, it allows us to see how attackers circumvent them. And last but not least, we see exactly the type of commands that the attacker runs. We see what they do. We see what they go after. We see how they go around the environment. And all of those things gives us the insight in producing the numbers that are seeing on the screen. So let's talk through them quickly. Right at the top, you see spear phishing. And that's going to remain at the top for a long time, right? Because we are humans. There's no such thing as applying a patch to us human and hope that we stop clicking on mails. It just doesn't work that way. So social engineering-based attacks, which are the bulk of what you see right there, will continue to exist for a long time. But what's more important than the thing that you're seeing here is the takeaway from this slide, right? And the key takeaway here is this. Regardless of the type of attacks that you see there, the initial vector, one thing is clear. The action takes place on the endpoint, okay? So secure your perimeter, right? Put in place the defensive mechanisms you want on your email gateways, on your web servers. Do all those things that are necessary. But make sure you have your eyes on the endpoint as well. Because when a user clicks on an attachment, that's where it runs. It runs on the endpoint. Next, after we've taken a look at the initial attack vector, let's look at what the attacker does almost every single time when they're in your environment. So if you look at the slide, you'll see that we have things like credential dumping, the use of PowerShell, they discover accounts, they use command line interfaces, and they use scripting. Now, there may be many ways to achieve what they're trying to do here, but again, there is one central theme. That particular central theme is that none of these that you're seeing on the screen are actually even remotely related to malware. There is no malware involved. Every single one of these techniques that they're using here has nothing to do with malware. It is what we call living off the land. Right? When you live off the land, and attackers love to do that for one reason. Right? If they live off the land, they're using the same tools as your administrator is using. They're using the same tools as your power users are using. And along with that, it allows them to camouflage themselves within your organization. And the longer they stay undercover, the more time they have to actually achieve their goals. Right? And that's why they're doing so. So remember, the key takeaway for this slide is it's not malware. When you're looking at a solution, right, to make sure that you have eyes and ears on your endpoint, it is essential that you do not get overly fixated on identifying malware, or else you could be missing out on the bigger picture. The next three things that I want to share with you are actually hot from the field, right, for want of a better word. These are nuggets that we're actually seeing in our response today. And first up, I want you to know that what we're seeing increasingly and increasing quite dramatically is the use of pen testers too by attackers. So one example of this is something called Bloodhound. Right? Bloodhound is a pen tester tool that's written by pen tester for the pen tester, right? And it turns out that it's so well made that attackers are adopting it. Right? One of the reasons why it's preferred by attacker, of course, is the fact that it's very stealthy. Again, it makes use of the tools that are already in an environment, so it helps them camouflage themselves. But more importantly, Bloodhound also allows visualization, right, of the objects in your domain. So with visualizations, it's very easy for the attacker to see what's the best path for them to attack to get to the crown jewels. And they use that too, right? Because who wouldn't want a good picture? So take note of that, right? Things like pen testers too, the good ones especially, they're actually being actively used by attackers today. Second one has to do more with supply chain, third-party sort of compromises, right? And these sort of compromises, once it happens, have the potential to be more impactful, right, than the traditional ways of entry. And here's why. When you have a relationship between a partner, an agency, or anyone that you trust, you tend to become more forgiving, right? You tend to maintain a link without necessarily doing additional checks on it. The attackers know that too, and that's precisely why they are trying to exploit this particular relationship. So in terms of third-party compromises, there are roughly two different sort of attacks, right? So one of it is targeted, the other is opportunistic. In the case of opportunistic targeting, most of it has to do with ransomware. They're deploying ransomware, they're encrypting your critical business files, and so that you don't really have any choice but to do their bidding. In the case of specific targeting, right, we're seeing that attackers researching on M&A efforts and then trying to target the organization, right, that is going to be acquired. Lurking in there so that when the networks finally merge together, right, they then come out and have the ability to do what they were in there for the first place, right? So also take note of that. The last nugget that I want to share with you from the field has to do more with cloud infrastructure compromise. So we're seeing a lot of API credential theft. And again, how this usually works is there is this set of APIs, they have static passwords, there is no multi-factor authentication protecting these passwords. And traditionally speaking, these used to be more opportunistic in nature. So attackers were just going to repositories, finding these keys and then using them. But they have come to realize how good and how valuable these keys are. And so now they're really targeting such things, actively finding these keys and then using them to carry out their attacks. Right? Whatever you have seen earlier, whatever case may be, one thing is very clear, right? Our current approach isn't working. The attackers are continuously able to go through our defenses. And in order to react better, we need to think a bit differently. So how does thinking differently work, right? And what do we need to do in order to think differently? The first thing that we can do before even going to any recommendation is, first and foremost, perhaps to adopt a model, right? Over here in the slide, what you see is a model that we've adopted. This is actually the MITRE attack framework. So the MITRE attack framework comprises of 12 distinct stages or tactics, ranging from initial access all the way through impact, right? The good thing about model, and the important thing about model, is that it allows you to crystallize your thoughts. And once you crystallize your thoughts and is able to pin down which part of the model things happen, you can then systematically solve the problem. At CrowdStrike, we like MITRE attack framework for a few reasons. One of it is that it's public domain, so everyone has access to it. And when everyone has access to it, everyone has a common vocabulary. Having a common vocabulary means that none of us are in two minds about what the attacker is doing or where the attacker is at. And along with that, we can formulate a response that is clear to everybody unambiguously, right? So in the slides that I follow, let's use the MITRE attack framework for me to demonstrate some of the recommendations that we're going to make. And let's start with the first one. The first recommendation that I want to make, based on the learnings that we have, right, is to have visibility everywhere, right? So get visibility on your endpoint, on your cloud workloads, on your containers if you're running them, even on your mobiles. In short, because attackers can be anywhere, you need to be everywhere, right? How does that look like on the MITRE framework? First, let's look at this. In terms of initial access, right, the attackers can attack you from anywhere. They can attack you through email, they can attack you through web, they can attack you through any potential attack vector. They can be anywhere. So you have to be everywhere. When they move around laterally, they can move around anywhere to the servers that you least expect. So again, don't let your guard down. Make sure that you see them. Exfiltration of data. When they do decide to steal something, they can put the data anywhere. They can go out and put it on the shared drive. They can go out and put it on their GitHub, anywhere. So make sure, and they can go out from any machine. So again, I cannot emphasize enough the need to make sure that you have visibility across your entire organization. Right? Number two, it is very important today, more than ever, to have real-time insight on what the attacker is doing. Right? And here's why. Right? Given the scale and the nature of the attacks that we're seeing today, the only way that you can match and exceed the attacker is to have real-time insights. Right? We no longer have the luxury of being able to do forensics on every single machine to find out what the attacker has been. We need real-time insight. As the attacker is doing this, we need to know what he's doing and where he's at. Right? And here's an explanation to show you why even more. If you looked at the MITRE attack lifecycle, right, which does a great job of cataloging all the different attack techniques, there are so many techniques that the attacker can use. Right? Imagine having to do forensics just so that you know exactly which one is being used by the attacker. Not only do you not have the time to do so, but each machine that you undertake this forensic on, you're giving the attacker more and more time to get closer and closer to their goals. So we really don't have the time for it today, right? You don't just want to see the attacker technique in how they gain initial compromise. Essentially, you want to see them everywhere. You want to see them as they establish persistence, as they try to get credential access, as they move laterally, as they steal your data. That's all where you want to see. And you want to see every single thing that they do there. Why is that important? Let me explain this next. Right? Let's look at this command called who am I. It's a very common command, and you probably see it hundreds, if not thousands, of times a day. Right? Administrator uses it to determine what rights they have. Would you trigger an alert on it? Or you can, right? But that would make it very noisy. And I think the only thing you will get is a very frustrated security team. The same goes for command like system info. Thousands of times a day we'll see. Right? Alerts? I don't think so. Add fine. Right? Same thing. Net user, even ping. None of this, right? You want to generate active alerts on it because it would result in a very noisy system. So what you really want to do, therefore, is that with most tools, you will suppress the alert. But do you know something? That although none of these commands on its own are malicious, they are very suspicious when you view as a whole. So here's what you can get when you track and monitor every single thing, have visibility onto your machine, right? On every single asset. You would be able to identify that this is something as part that the attacker is doing as part of reconnaissance, right? The trained eye will be able to tell you that not all is going well and that there's something suspicious there. And you can then look into it. So that's the power of having visibility and seeing everything in your environment. Now, if you like what you just heard and you think that, well, I would like to bring this and I would like to do it on premise, the reality is you cannot do this on premise, and here's why. In order to do what we talked about, you would have to build something that looks like a visualization here. It would be very massive, right? You will have many servers, many clusters, many parts of things that you need to pay attention to. In the end, you might find that you spend more time and attention trying to manage the infrastructure than actually doing security. And therefore, as much as you can actually do this, cloud is the only way to go. And at CrowdStrike, we do all this in the cloud where we take away that difficulty of managing the environment for you, and you focus only on security. Last but not least, I want to touch on perhaps something that we've all been used to for a long time, and that is to let go of signature, right? Do not think that signature is enough to go forward in the future, right? Signature is a thing of a past. It doesn't scale well, and you'll see in my next slide, but let it go, right? I know we've been used to signature for the last 40 years. A lot of us grew up with the notion that signature is the way to detect things, right? But it's no longer that effective. Believe instead in machine learning, right? Understand that machine learning has what it takes to give you more credible results, more consistent results as we deal with the sheer volume of data that we're seeing today, and also behavioral indicators. Indicators that says what's malicious and what's not, okay? We need to fight machine at machine speed, right? At the rate that malware is going, we don't have what it takes to use signature, and I'll show you why. Here's why. If you look at this slide, right? In just 2019, the world has seen about 970 million malware, give or take. Now, it is impossible, right, for any detection system to actually cater for 970 million malware without significantly slowing down the performance. And we cannot slow down the performance, which therefore means that sacrifices must be made and gaps will be created in detection, right? So this approach cannot scale well, and we therefore need to move away from it, right? Machine learning does not require signature. What it does instead is look at characteristics of any given file and use it to determine if the file is good or bad. We've done this as human for a long time, right? Any custom officers at the immigration would be looking for people with suspicious characteristics. Now all we're doing is moving this particular model into the machine, and you'll be surprised at how well it works, right? Let's look then at virtual patching, which is another thing that the world has gotten used to. Look at the amount of vulnerability that exists per year. How can it be possible for us to keep up with this number of vulnerability? It's not possible. And when it's not possible, again, gaps are introduced. So instead of being overly fixated on saying that I'm going to patch that vulnerability, virtual or not, let's focus on what happens after the vulnerability has taken place, if it was indeed exploited, right? The attacker doesn't stop there. The attacker has to continue doing other things in order to get to his goals. And we will catch them there when they attempt to do the post-exploitation activities, as we call it. Right? So that's a more scalable way of doing things, since it's necessary action on their behalf. So what does malicious indicator necessarily look like? Right? So on this slide is a diagram, and it represents a process flow. So let's look at this. Right? The process flow starts this way. It starts from saying a process executes, whatever process that may be. It goes on to enumerate the file system. And following the enumeration of file system, it actually goes on to delete backups and then calls encryption routine, right? So when it does so, what does this mean to you, right? I think intuitively, all of us know that this is typical of ransomware behavior, right? And that's exactly what it is. So what we've done with behavioral indicators is we have codified these 4 particular actions and say that, if I see these 4 processes coming, then it can't be a good thing. So the next time round, when something like this happens, we're going to flag it out and say that we've seen something suspicious. And if you think about it, whether it's a new variant of a ransomware, whether it's a new ransomware altogether, this is what the ransomware has to do. And if you can codify these as bad behaviors, you're going to get them when they appear, when they manifest, even at day 1, right, or day 0. Which brings us to the final topic, right, of what now? Where do we go from here, right? So I would urge you that at this moment, if you have been listening to what I say, you like what I said, visit our website right here. That's a picture of our website there. We actually offer a free assessment, right? So go on, sign up for the assessment, right? Have it installed in your environment and see what it can do for you, right? You will find that as part of the assessment, all you need to do is install one single agent that will get you 10 different features, right, from our platform, 10 capabilities. These capabilities will instantaneously help you shed light on your environment and what are some of the things that we can tell you, right? We will be able to tell you again, across the MITRE ATT&CK framework, we'll be able to tell you things like what your critical vulnerabilities are, what processes are running, what applications are running in your environment, are there brute force login, what assets are there, do you have all your endpoints covered, and if not, how many endpoints are not covered, and so on and so forth. Right? We will tell you very, very valuable information across the entire queue chain, like you see here in the slide. right? So I would urge you to just sign up and try it out, and don't hesitate, try this out today. With that, I hope you enjoyed the session, you found it useful. Thank you very much.